Cool. Thank you. Yeah, as anyone who, if you guys have been reading our blog recently and saw this conversation sort of start up, you'll see we're really at the early stage of figuring out what our sourcing policies are. And I think the blog post focused a lot on fair trade, which isn't really what I'd like to do. I think there's a lot of fair trade bashing going on at the moment, which isn't very productive for us. We would just like to figure out what our policies, our sourcing policies should be going forward. We got some amazing feedback from that blog post, and we've sort of got into some really productive conversations with customers, and I just hope this will be an extension of that. So this is what I wanted to run through. I don't think it's going to take a huge amount of time. While I'm going through it, stop me with any questions at all. But I'm kind of keen to get to the open discussion bit at the end. Cool. Is that all right? So I'm the founder, CEO at Pact. Rob is our, titles in a company this size are only partly useful, but it's CFO, COO, and Will's our head of coffee. Actually, do you guys want to give a quick intro to what you do or what you've done before? Or
sure.
Just so that you know, if you've got questions, you can direct them at these guys or to me.
I'm a chartered accountant from Ernst & Young originally. I've been in the startup world for the last 7-8 years. Worked in about 6-7 London-based startups and one Berlin-based startup. Joined this company in March. My responsibilities are wide and varied, but everything. Okay, I'll talk loud. Sorry. My responsibilities are all things financial, making sure that we spend our money that we've raised wisely, making sure that we've got the right staffing in place, the right systems in place, and dealing with things like audits. And if that's what we decide to go down with this project, that will be that auditing side will fall within my remit.
My name is Will. I have been in the coffee industry for the last 10 years. I have fulfilled within that time most roles a person in the coffee industry can hold. Most recently, I've spent the last 3.5 years working from account to the coffee hunters, sourcing and shipping and selling some of the best coffee in the world. And I came on board with Pact about 2 months ago, with my role being to continue finding the best coffee in the world for Pact, working with creating great relationships with great people, to fulfill our friendship promise, whether that be with suppliers or customers.
So I guess if you're directing questions at anyone in terms of kind of vision and direction for the company, I guess that's me in terms of the professional running of the company. That's Rob, and Will is the person who has bought hundreds of tons of coffee, negotiated over the table with farmers. So anything to do with sort of conditions of origin, Will knows a great deal more than either of us about that. So I wanted to run through why now. So we're 18 months old as a business, and we haven't done this before. So why have we sort of started doing it now? Our pact with growers, like the reason we were called Pact, one of the elements of that was a promise that we made to growers and published it on our blog 18 months ago, so I've just replicated it here. Our broad brushstrokes reasons for not getting Fairtrade certified or not only selling Fairtrade coffee. What we have planned right now, and then that's it. It's kind of open discussion. So anything that we've missed, anything you think we failed to ask, any answers that you think we've given that are weak, anything really. So jumping in, I guess the reason that we're having this conversation now is we've only just started trading directly with growers when Will came on board. We're about to import our first few tons of direct traded coffee. The goal is to get to 95% of the coffee that we sell being direct traded inside 6 months. I think also we're reaching a size where we can make a difference. I'm pretty pragmatic about this stuff. I think it's easy to be, as a brand, quite idealistic and do stuff like be ethical from day one, and that be your core. My personal opinion is that if you're an ethical brand, the likelihood is you will only ever sell to people who are already buying highly ethical products anyway, because it doesn't resonate with most of the public, for better or worse. That's probably decreasingly the case, which is a good thing, but in my opinion, that's the case now. We're kind of reaching a size where if we achieve in switching to 95% direct traded, inside 6 months, actually we will be making a big difference. I mean, it's still a drop in the ocean in terms of the coffee industry, but within the year we'll be sort of buying and selling 10 tons of coffee a month, with a following wind more. So now's the time to do it. When you're running a business this size, I think prioritization is essentially a process of deciding what not to do yet, because it's not important to do yet. There's always, for every one thing we do, there's 9 things we wish we had the capacity or the resources to do. So you've got to be pretty militant with your time. And finally, because it matters to our customers, and I think that's been made really obvious through the blog. To be clear, I don't mean that it's a marketing thing, purely, but I do believe in the future. The future, I think, is one of ethical consumerism or ethical capitalism, where the people who are in a position to make the biggest difference are commercial businesses with good hearts who are very good at running commercial businesses. It was an argument I made at university, and it's one I kind of stick by now. If it didn't matter to our customers, we'd still do it. We would just probably do it more privately. Yeah, so that's why to do it now. Thanks, Pete. So this is something that we published on our blog in June 2013. We used to be called Your Grind, and we rebranded as Pact, which took a long time to think through. And the reason we ended up with the name Pact was because we felt it reflected 3 things really well: a pact that we have with one another as colleagues and between myself and the board, a pact that we have with our customers, and finally a pact that we have with our growers. And we published this on our blog in June 13. It's still there. There's one amendment has had to be made recently, which I'll tell you about now for full transparency. But this was it. Number 1, we will always treat and store your coffee with the same love, care and attention that you have. The coffee that we sell, it's fair to say, is in the top 0.1% of like quality of coffee on the planet. It's a bit glib to say it's the best coffee in the world, but it's certainly at a level where it ceases to be about quality and it starts to be about taste. So it would be remiss of us not to do that. We will always ensure that you're paid more than the Fairtrade rate for your beans. Full disclosure, when we first published this, it said we'll always ensure that you're paid at least double the Fairtrade rate for your beans. And we made an amendment recently when we started digging more into the data and found that that wasn't actually feasible without increasing the price of the coffee that we charge. And by increasing the price, we would reduce the number of customers, we would no longer have influence, and again, we'd do sort of more good for a small number of people, which I don't think is the aim. We've left the original blog post as is, with an amendment at the bottom we haven't like retrospectively edited. And finally, and I think this is the key point, if we're successful, we'll use our influence to make your lives better, not worse. And yeah, even then, I couldn't get more specific than that, because it's such a complex issue. But I thought that was a good coverall promise to make. And now is the time to figure out what that actually means and to whom. Does that all Yeah, I don't want to sit and kind of just broadcast at you. If you've got any questions at all, do just give me a wave. So, why not get Fairtrade certified? Something I'd say, which isn't on here, is like, I mean, I don't want to make out that we feel Fairtrade is a bad thing. We don't, but I do see it as similar to the minimum wage, for example, or the living wage in the UK. I mean, it's really, really good that as a movement it's happened and that it's had its effect, but it's not something to aspire to. That's probably it. The reasons that we can't be Fairtrade certified and still do what we're trying to do is that the coffee producers that we work with are the best on the planet. They're really small producers. In some cases, 5 or 6, like a family of 5 or 6 running the farm entirely.
Yeah, in lots of cases. The Bolivia Montana we sold earlier this year. The production was 15 bags. You know, really tiny production.
15 bags. Big. Yeah. Sorry, Bolivia Montana.
Yeah, less than a ton, 900 kilos.
Yeah.
A ton and 50 kilos.
Yeah. So some of the growers that we work with will always just say, I'm repeating just for this and anyone listening online. Some of the farmers we've worked with, for example, Bolivia, Familia Montana, their total annual production was a little bit over a ton. It's just not feasible for them to be certified. It was superb coffee. Our customers loved it. We'll gain more customers. We'll keep our customers longer.
That was the most popular coffee we've ever had.
Oh, really?
More people that had that bought a second bag of coffee from us than any other. That was 50% of people that had our first bag of coffee for £1. That was that went on to buy a second bag of coffee from us.
So they're independent. They're too small, really, to be part of a cooperative. And actually, when you produce and sell a ton of coffee, the cost of certifying yourself as fair trade is just completely. It's probably what percentage of your annual income? Let's do the maths. We bought a ton of their coffee. It's what they grew. Sorry, I'm really carrying on.
It's potentially 20% of profits.
20% of profit, even 20% of. Anyway, it's completely unfeasible to spend that sum of money, which is in excess of $1,000, getting certified as a fair trade farm. So the people we want to buy the coffee from, because their coffee's so good, aren't fair trade certified. You need to be part of a cooperative as well to be certified as fair trade, i.e. working in conjunction with processors and so on, and selling all or I think most of your coffee through them, which ours don't. Secondly, the auditing process, which verifies that fair trade producers are fair trade, is really badly flawed. There was a SOAS report recently, which if you read, talks a lot about when farms are audited, i.e. someone from fair trade turns up to check that they're not using child labour, not using prison labour, paying over fair trade rate, paying fair wages, that the farm is given more than a month's notice that the inspection is going to happen. The full inspection happens at their HQ, not in the field, and the farmer chooses the people who are interviewed to be asked how much they've been paid. Which sounds like it's wide open to abuse to me, and certainly I know that Chris Kramer, who wrote that report, agrees. That said, at the time when fair trade came about, it was better than not having fair trade, but that was in the 60s, and then it developed, became popular in the 80s, and now we have more robust ways of gathering data than asking 3 people. Finally, and I think this is really important, it disconnects the quality of coffee with how much is paid for it, which in my mind, just doesn't make sustainable economic sense. Much better to find the best, pay a high amount for it, and then demonstrate by example that if people increase the quality or hello. Hey. Yeah, work with suppliers to help them produce better quality coffee on the promise of paying more for it. That makes a ton more sustainable economic sense to me. So, what's our approach? Like I said at the beginning, it's really early days, seedling stage, and it's in development. I know that's not a very reassuring thing to be told, and it's not a very credible alternative to fair trade. So, we need contribution. We need our community, the wider community, to tell us what a better approach is, or to help us figure it out. I mean, we'll make investments. We're not waiting for other people to do this stuff for us. But it's going to cost money to come up with time and money to come up with a better alternative. And any steer we can get from our customers, or current or future, now's the time to contribute. We've put 3 things in place this week, really recent, which we hope, while we go through this exploratory phase, reassure everyone that we're kind of serious and that we're not going to drag our heels whilst doing unethical things. First of all, we'll pay a minimum of 125% the fair trade rate for every bag of coffee that we sell. We'll publish on our blog everything we've paid for coffee, so the percentage. So if a fair trade coffee is X per pound, X dollars per pound, on the day that we buy it, we'll pay 1.25 times X or more. I think we looked back historically, and our historical average is actually 37% more, so 137%. I doubt it will ever be as low as 125, but yeah, I promise it will never be lower. Secondly, obviously it's easy to say that, but KPMG are going to audit what we pay for all of our coffees, which I hope is as robust a verification as we can give right now. And finally, and this I think is the exciting bit, we're going to try to approach this problem in a 21st century way, rather than limited audits. We're working with SOAS University, who again, Chris Kramer is enormously involved and incredibly well read, possibly one of the best read people on the planet on this subject. And we're going to try to robustly answer this question, which I think is our main hypothesis. Does paying a farmer more than the fair trade rate for his coffee, which is the easy part, result in better welfare for the people working on his farms, his or her? And if so, to what extent? To use a highly charged term, I guess this is trickle-down economics. And I think there are far more robust ways to find out if we're doing good in the places where we're being from which we're being supplied. Far more robust ways than relying on sort of 3 data points in audit. We're not sure exactly what the methodology is going to be yet. The reason we're working with SOAS is, I think, as a startup, you're really good at making big, bold claims and then taking risky decisions. Academics are very good at coming up with methodology that gives robust data. So I'd far rather defer to them for that piece. If left to a startup founder, you'd ask Twitter and believe the answer. So yeah, that's it. And that is what we're going to do. I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know what you guys think. any concerns with it or limitations?
I'd like to know sort of what timescale you're looking at. The work with SOAS, and how long are we talking to see some results from that investigation process?
Yeah, really good question. So I think we'll get early data inside 3 months. This was something that Chris and I talked about briefly the week before last, and that's another big difference, I guess, between entrepreneurs and academics. He said 18 months, I said 6 weeks. We're going to meet somewhere in the middle. I mean, I think my job is to kind of light the fire and make sure we're progressing things as quickly as is humanly possible. And his task will be to make sure that it's robust and that we're not cutting corners. When I say early data, realistically, we're going to be talking about, and this is all hypothetical at the moment, but I could envisage finding out a significant number of data points of real wages per a non-Fairtrade farm, Fairtrade farm, and one of our farms, and look at in a robust way, find out what people have been paid on each of those, and correlate that against the average price paid for coffee. So that first bit, that first kind of picture, should be fairly quick. I mean, the challenge then, of course, is to scale that to something that's globally relevant. And robust. My hope is 3 months, but Chris hasn't yet confirmed that will be the case. I'll be pushing to do it quickly.
Am I right in saying you're not considering going Fairtrade? You're more backing up why you don't want to go Fairtrade, but you want us as customers to know that you are still an ethical source of your coffee ethically. Is that correct?
Shall I just repeat questions for?
Yeah.
Yeah, is that better? So the question was, are you right in thinking that we're not considering going Fairtrade, but we're trying to reassure people that we're not ignoring our responsibilities to source ethically? Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's not to say we've never considered it. We really looked into it. It became obvious fairly early into that investigation that it wasn't going to make sense for us. I hope I've explained why. I mean, those are 3 of many reasons, but they're probably the 3 most compelling that I gave. And it's not, I mean, as I said before, it's not a marketing exercise. We're not trying to reassure people that we're going to do something ethical. I mean, it was always my intention to build a large business, certainly, but to do so in part so that we could have a positive impact on the world, economically, environmentally. Not really reassuring, I don't think. I guess it's just we've got a very open and transparent approach to business here. I think if you look at our blog, you'll see that we go into this level of detail in conversation with our customers about loads of decisions that we make. It's just another one of them. To the extent that our customers help us choose the coffees that we sell and how to roast them and how to describe them, and our customers they contribute a huge amount to how we run our business. I think increasingly, actually, businesses will be run in this way.
It's really helpful. We've got a lot of decisions to make, and if our customers help us, it's a quicker way to do the right thing.
It's a much quicker way of doing the right thing. It's a much better way of making sure that you're not like blind stab in the dark, hope that you're doing the thing that people are going to want you to do. But also, I mean, it's a dark admission. I've been in marketing for most of my career, digital. If you read textbooks or sort of any content from the 80s, early 90s about branding and marketing, you'll see there's a lot of conversation about, like, first of all, you figure out what resonates with people, and then you decide how to position yourself to appear like that, and then you figure out a way to make sure everyone knows that you appear. I've even spoken to a couple of agencies. I spoke to a branding agency about 6 months ago, and they said, so what is it that you want to be? And I thought, it's just such a backwards question. It's kind of, well, we are this. This is what we are. The question is, how do we make sure everybody knows this is how we are? I don't know if that's really unclear. In the age of social media, you can't pretend to be something that you're not anymore. And I think that's a really good thing. You know, talking before about ethical consumerism, one of the things that's driving that most now is that people can see behind the curtain of most companies, and customers care about it. It's not because hundreds of CEOs of sort of FTSE 500 companies have suddenly, their consciences have suddenly changed. I think it's a really good thing, myself. Twitter question.
Hangout.
A Hangouts question.
How are you going to identify and find your coffee and negotiate the prices you pay? So I'm guessing, how are you going to find and negotiate the coffee?
Oh, yeah. That's one for Will. Will, do you want to repeat the question first as well?
I think the question was, how are we going to find the quality of coffee, and
Identify and find our coffee and then negotiate the prices.
how do we negotiate the price
And find coffee.
and find the
Identify ethical coffees and find it.
How do you buy coffee?
How do we buy coffee? How do we find coffee? Okay. What we're doing is going out and cupping coffee, meeting producers.
Cupping means tasting.
Sorry, cupping, which is tasting coffee. Finding coffee that matches the quality criteria we're looking for, and then going out and making contracts with producers. We're currently in the process of organising a trip out to Brazil, hopefully in early September, maybe late September, where I will be going to taste vast quantities of coffee, and having tasted it and selected the coffees that match our quality criteria, then going to meet the producers and make contracts with them, and actually be at the farm and see what's going on there.
So at that point, you go visit the farm, but you then do some kind of auditing of their ethical criteria, whether they meet with your standards as a company at that point, or is that something that comes later?
Sorry. Yep. No, like I said before, auditing I think is a flawed process. I'm not saying that it definitely won't happen. What I'm saying is we haven't figured out what the most robust way to answer the questions that we need to answer are. I think we could tick that box and say, oh well, we met with three of the people who worked on that farm, and they told us that what they were paid, and the farmer made the introduction, and we had that conversation in front of him, and then tick a box and put it on our blog and say, look, aren't we? But it just isn't robust, and that kind of underpins what we're trying to say here. Auditing is not, in my opinion, the right way to go about it. It's like small, selective auditing. So no, we'll go. We'll work with Chris and SOAS to figure out a better approach.
Do you want to just
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So when it comes to producing coffee of the quality we're looking for, it takes a lot more effort and skill. It takes skilled labor. It's not picking cherries to produce specialty coffee is not an unskilled job, and you have to get your pickers to pick the right cherries and to bring back only ripe cherries. You have to pay more, and you have to find the best pickers, and you have to get the same pickers back year on year. And the kind of guys we're working with are doing that. So they're creating jobs for people annually, the same people producing higher wages, and that's what we want to test with the ideas we have. When it comes to the drying patios, the sorting mills, all of the people all the way through the process need to be skilled in producing high quality coffee, and the trickle down economics is that's where that comes in. You know, we're relying on these guys producing a good quality product because they're employing people and paying them a good wage, and the people having a job which they respect and that they care for because they're getting paid fairly for it. So it's a big thing about quality, and it's what the difference between quality and charity.
So we're going to follow up on that. I think this is a question a little bit.
Sorry.
So it's not how you buy coffee, but how you find the right producers and then negotiate your prices with the producers. So who is the middleman? Who introduces you to the farmer? Who you visit? And let's say if I...
In a lot of cases, it's your phone book, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you know they have the producers' interests at heart?
So as of right now, what we are doing is I am going out and finding producers. I'm contacting coffee farmers directly. There's not a middleman. I'm negotiating preliminary prices with producers, and they are then coming back and you know we're talking pricing, but it's direct with farmers.
Maybe talk through the Guatemala process of the coffees that we've just bought. I mean,
So
how exactly did that happen?
So in that instance, I spoke with some friends I have at a company. It's the Ana Cafe, which is a kind of government-funded specialty coffee board for Guatemala. I spoke with contacts there, and they put me in touch with certain producers of whom they knew had the kind of quality coffee that we wanted to taste. I arranged to have samples sent across. And
specifically, these are runners-up in a national competition.
So yep, these guys are runners-up in a competition called Cup of Excellence, and their coffee was not going to be sold. The winners had been put forward to an international auction, but this coffee was just sat in warehouses waiting to be sold. And in reality, right now, the majority of people looking to buy coffee from Guatemala will have made their contracts and shipped the coffee. So us going in, we're going in and we're trying to find those amazing coffees and create new relationships with people. I have then started open dialogue with them, tasted their coffee, and you know, we found amazing coffee that we hope to create relationships with that will last decades. You know.
But we're buying directly from them, not from a Coyote or a middleman or an agent.
We're dealing directly with the producers themselves. There is nobody between us.
And the price negotiation?
The price negotiation, they came to me with pricing that they wanted for the coffee, and I've gone back to them and we've agreed pretty much what they wanted for the coffee.
What,
you know.
I think it's important to be totally clear.
Okay.
Was it what they wanted for the coffee?
Yep. Yeah, in every case.
No.
So they gave. I was given.
That's what I found.
Sorry. I was given a recommendation for what they were after. I tasted what price they wanted us to pay for the coffee. I cupped the coffee, and in my opinion, in every case, the quality of the coffee is worth what they asked for, and it was more than our guarantee of 125% of the Fairtrade rate.
Top of your head, do you know what it was? Sorry.
They were all slightly different percentages. I think one of them was 137, but I can't remember all off the top of my head. But you know, fantastic coffee, and you know, we're laying the groundwork. We're already in the back and forth talking about what we're going to do about next year's coffee, and they want to do business with us for next year. It's about creating a sustainable business for them and a friendship and a relationship that lasts for years, you know, decades. Is that it? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think you sort of partly just answered it, but earlier on you said that you're buying quality coffee that's in the top 1% of the world. Roughly.
I think I said 0.1%.
Oh, 0.1%, sorry, 0.1%.
Well,
just, but my question is just really whether it's is that a kind of, is there an objective assessment, or is it basically ultimately kind of subjective about what is quality? I mean,
Talk about the rating system of coffee.
Okay, so there is essentially a 100-point scale for measuring the quality of coffee, and specialty coffee is defined by the Specialty Coffee Association of America as a coffee which scores over 80 points on that scale. So we are looking for coffee that scores 80 points plus on that scale. I would say, in general, pretty much every coffee stock score between 82 and 84, 85 points. We were tasting coffee from Guatemala, from the producers that I was just talking about, which was scored by national jurors there at 85. When the international jury came in, they scored it slightly below 85 points. I cupped the coffee here, and I agreed with the national jury. I scored 2 of the coffees that we've contracted so far 85, and one of them 86. They're really fantastic coffees.
To put that into context, how would a supermarket coffee score?
A standard off-the-shelf coffee you'd expect to score 75-ish, maybe 70 to 71. Okay. It's not an exercise I carry out in supermarket coffee regularly, but you're looking for coffees that are unique in flavour and free of defect, that have sweetness, that have acidity.
Need to speak up a bit.
Sorry, that have sweetness and acidity and complex flavours.
I'm sorry, just to push back a bit on that. So, in terms of the Specialty Coffee Association, like, how objective is their assessment? So, at what point, where does the
Who does the score?
Yeah.
Right. How do they actually arrive at that score? Do you know what I mean? I don't know if you know.
So it's
Question for that.
sorry. So how does the SCA? How does the scoring system work? Or
Yeah.
okay, so the scoring system is based on 8 attributes, which include flavor, sweetness, acidity, mouthfeel, balance, clean cup.
It's not things that you or I need to.
It's 8. I'm going to feel really guilty now for forgetting the last 2. Aftertaste, and I'll come back to the last one. Yeah. The 100-point scale is built, and then each of those attributes is scored. Once you've scored those points, each of those attributes, there's an add-on which you make. I can't remember off the top of my head how many points it is. It's written on the corner of my sheet. And then there is a deduction made, which is quite punishing for any defects which are found in a cup, which then has a multiplier. So you take points off for finding defects like sours, blacks, Rio, phenol. There are lots of different defects. Again, you don't really need to know about those.
I think it's right to say, isn't it, that it's not one person tasting a coffee going, oh, well, that's a 7, but rather lots of people who have the same certification and training to assign numbers to those qualities.
Yeah.
And then they take essentially a bigger data approach.
Yeah.
So
I've spent the last 3.5 years cupping coffee for hours every day, adjudicating coffee by this scoring system and working out what's great and what's not. In actual fact, working for Pact, it's as much now about paying for the quality as it is about finding the coffee that Pact customers love. I'm here to buy fantastic coffee that our customers love.
is anyone else?
There's a tweet
Oh yeah.
from Jeff Stanson. He said, is Fairtrade really that ethical? When does it stop being fair and become part of the monopoly?
Blimey. I don't know if I should touch that one.
Yeah.
So someone on Twitter has asked, so again, is Fairtrade really that ethical? Is Fairtrade really that ethical? I don't actually feel qualified enough to answer that question. They would argue yes, some people would argue no. I think people are starting to really understand some of the limitations of fair trade, but to be honest, I'm not sure that is the most prevalent question here, because for the reasons I explained before, fair trade, even if we thought it was the absolute gold standard, we wouldn't be able to sell coffee as good as we sell if we insisted on selling fair trade coffee. Is it? Like I said before, had it not happened, there would be lots of people in the world who are worse off today than they currently are, and therefore it's a great thing. But I do see it more as the minimum wage than as something for a company like ours or any of the other specialty, coffee roasters. I'm not suggesting that we are unique in this. I think most of the companies that sell coffee of our standard have a similar view of fair trade that we do, which is like the minimum wage. It's brilliant that it happened, but it's not something for us to aspire to. I hope that answers the question. I sidestepped it a bit. Anything else?
Not really related, but
Okay, we've got an unrelated question off the internet. That's always dangerous ground, isn't it? Yeah.
how about if I use my own coffee? Is it possible in any country? Because I know in Brazil, uses it, and also Colombia. But if I want to do it for my own coffee shop, I'm just curious. Whereabouts is the coffee shop based? We don't know. We're on the internet. So
Whereabouts is the coffee shop based? If you're still online.
Let's assume it's in the UK.
No, you're going to really struggle to produce coffee in the UK. They did it actually down at the Eden Project. They grew coffee in the Eden Project. The climate has to be right, which it's not here, and the soil. And typically, you need to be growing really good coffee at altitude.
£300 million greenhouse would cover it.
Yeah, exactly. But I know that
tried to grow coffee on Guernsey in a greenhouse and come with first crop.
Yeah.
2000.
We had 6 coffee plants in our last office, and they all died.
I've had a crop of cherries.
Oh, yeah.
3 whole cherries. Not quite enough to roast in a 100-gram sample roast.
No.
So we didn't even
So
get
sadly, no.
I think they made a cup-out coffee through Eden Project.
No, Eden Project, they roasted all of it, and I think I'm right in saying it was all served in Jamie Oliver restaurants, which is kind of cool.
Yeah.
I mean,
Relevant question now.
oh, good.
What are your geographical priorities? What are the geographical priorities for your ethical growth? Will you be sourcing natural resources? How will you identify the resources?
Well, I mean, our geographical priorities are to buy what's in season. Our coffees typically are bought when they're in season, not sort of hundreds of tons of commodity coffee just roasted any which way and kept in storage. Unless you've got anything to add to your previous answer about how we find and buy coffees. Is there anything
there's one
specific?
slight addition to make, and that is that, as I said earlier, we're looking to buy high quality coffee that is the kind of coffee our customers love. And right now, looking at the kind of coffee our customers are giving great feedback about, it is not the same profile as you would expect to get from African coffee. So if you look back at Pact's, our coffee catalogue over the past 18 months, I think you'll find one African coffee.
Lion Peaberry.
Lion Peaberry,
Which was fabulous.
from Tanzania, which was loved here, but
Awful with milk.
but didn't actually didn't feedback so well from customers. We will be launching another African coffee, which is sourced through the broker I used to work for, Macanta, and that will be coming online on the website in the next month or so. In that case, the coffee was bought through the Ethiopian Coffee Exchange. Macanta tried to deal directly in Ethiopia, but in terms of local economy ethics, it was not something that was able to happen at all without things being a little dodgy. So we stuck to the rules. They stuck to the rules.
Good. Again, slightly unrelated question, but why not? If I live in Paraguay, how do I contact you with a producer and taste it?
Contact me, will at pactcoffee.com. Will at pactcoffee.com. Any great coffee, please send it in.
It's not entirely related to ethics, but
Yeah.
but they've heard how stringent we are with quality control, and they
Yep.
want to step
And they
up.
want
So
to
that's
say, yeah,
quite impressive.
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great. I'd love to taste any great coffee.
I feel like, as we said, we'd be on until 8. We should maybe hang around in case more questions come in. But just hang on, this feels a little bit adversarial anyway. So maybe we should just make sure we're here. Yeah?
Do you guys want a top drink?
I'm gonna.
It's a very, very selfish offer that you run out.
I'll hop
No,
on.
no, I'm not. I'm good. I'm on water.
Alternative
quality of coffee is so directly related to skills on the day, as opposed to necessarily the kind of forward trend.
There are multiple things that affect the quality of the coffee, but what I can say is picking cherries that are perfectly ripe, drying the coffee evenly and properly over the right length of time, sorting the coffee properly in mills. Coffee is hand sorted in mills still. Every mill I've ever been to has an electronic eye for checking every individual green bean as it shoots out at the end of the quality sorter. And yeah, after that electronic eye, there are tables of women hand sorting coffee because they better hand pick the defects out. It's a human process.
Because that's more reassuring to me as someone who is a coffee maker. It's much more reassuring to me knowing that if it wasn't good coffee, or if it's good coffee, then almost certainly you've got well-paid staff because they're.
Well, this is what we want
that's
to
our
prove.
main positive, and something we hope to prove.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, it kind of, in the conversations that we've had, that seems like an inevitability, but that's no reason to sort of spin the company colours to that mast. It seems too logical not to be true, but we need to work with someone like Chris to actually, in a robust, defensible, and what's the word? Well, unbiased way, prove that that's the case.
No, we can't just assume by.
Well, if it's disproven, I'm completely open to it being disproven robustly, so we can figure out how and why and go back to the drawing board. I mean, again, that's the process of launching a company, coming up with hypotheses. When they're disproven, you kind of have a slight panic, and then you take one step back and look at the problem again and see if you can pivot around it. And that's exactly what we'll do here, as we do sort of in every other part.
But it's why we needed real in-house, because we needed that expertise to be able to taste what. We all love coffee, but I'm sure John's in a.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think this conversation is really good to go in line.
Yeah, sure.
Just because we were chatting about stuff.
Okay.
If you want to put the sound back on, just see that.
Yeah, no worries.
Probably brilliant.
It was probably
We needed the expertise in-house, so we could satisfy ourselves that we were buying great coffee. I'm sure if Steve and I or anyone else went off to Colombia to try and buy some coffee,
have a lovely time.
a really nice time, and we bought some coffee, I'm sure. But whether or not it was any good or something our customers would have loved, I can promise you it probably wouldn't.
No.
I think I was struggling for questions because I feel like what you're doing is already good. Anyway, I feel like I'm quite sure of what you're doing, which I think is why I was struggling to dig deep into sort of Q&A about it, to be honest. Yeah, just to let you know why I struggle with questions. And I didn't really have any to give you, I'm quite sure of what you guys are doing.
It's alright, you haven't lost any marbles.
Well, I mean, I'll in which case, I'll offer you a question which was a really difficult one that we talked about. I'd love to get your take as customers on it. We were talking about, should we publish the price that we pay for our coffee on our blog? Because you might have seen in the presentation I said we're going to publish the percentage of Fairtrade rate that we paid. This is an alright thing to talk about, isn't it?
I'm totally fine with
A
it.
bit like that.
Yeah, I know. Well, I know, I could pretend it was something else.
It is a question that I thought of asking.
Yeah, so.
But assume that as a business you want to do that. But from my perspective as a customer, if I'm not really going to understand necessarily the relationship between the price you pay and how much I pay at the end for my coffee.
Well, that was it.
If I see that £6.99 is a fair price, well, that's a fair price to me. What you pay to the farmer is kind of disconnected almost from that. And I just want to know that it is more than, as you said, more than fair trade.
Yeah.
So
I think
if it's a percentage or if it's an actual figure, it matters not almost.
I think what's also important is you need a reference point. You know, the C market, which is what the fair trade price is based on, fluctuates daily.
It's like a stock exchange.
It is
published every day.
Yeah, and so the ICE price is different today as it was yesterday. So if we publish a price that we've paid for coffee on the bag of coffee that we sell you, you have no reference to when that coffee was bought or what could have been paid for that coffee by someone else. So by putting the percentage on that we've paid above fair trade on the day that I signed a contract with a producer, you've got a direct reference point. It sets your perspective. It's the most honest way of doing it.
But then equally, you don't necessarily, you have a reference point. You don't necessarily know in the wider context how much they're getting. So if you're buying coffee at a time when the market is very weak, then it can look very, I'm thinking about, as a company, you want to be very transparent. It could look really good on you if you pay a bit more. The percentage will be different. But in reality, the producer might still be getting quite a better this month or that month, quite a low price. So,
well, I think, I mean, our coffees, being specialty coffees, are actually slightly, no, they're enormously buffered from market fluctuation. So and there are times when the commodity price for coffee, actually quite often times when the commodity price drops below the cost of production and coffee is being sold at a loss. And that simply doesn't happen in coffees of this standard. Something I sort of stopped myself from saying earlier, but perhaps I should have done, was this 125% minimum. If when Will was buying those Guatemalan coffees we were talking about earlier, he'd dug his heels in and said, no, we're paying this amount, and it was the fair trade rate, the farmers would have laughed and walked away and sold it to one of the other people in the queue, desperate to buy their coffees for more than fair trade rate. Like, none of this is being done purely, like, we don't look at a coffee we could buy for X and say, we'll pay 1.25X. All we're saying is that we won't, if we develop, I guess, a position of greater influence, we won't abuse it, even if we could. I mean, the likelihood is we couldn't, because the coffees, they're being sold on the open market for more than the fair trade rate anyway. Again, I think it just backs up the fact that the fair trade model doesn't apply to specialty.
And also, the idea of the creation of these relationships is that we can offer a price for coffee that is sustainable year on year and fairly consistent, so the producer knows what they're going to be getting year on year per pound of coffee. There will be fluctuations depending on weather conditions and the actual yield of coffee from the farm, but year on year get that great price for coffee. And the thing that really sums up how good the specialty price for coffee is that when a couple of years ago the commodity price hit the highest it's been in almost all time, it hit just over $3 a pound. Companies I worked with buying specialty coffee didn't have a single defaulted contract. If you looked at people who were buying other coffee, there were defaults on contracts because producers who had signed contracts at lower prices were hardly going to, they had to make the money where they could.
So the producer would have made an agreement one year to sell the next. And when the market hit a high, they went, I don't want to honour the contract that I agreed last year because
the
I can get this price this year.
And they
can't blame someone for trying to do that.
And in cases where people didn't have relationships, that go back for years and weren't paying that high premium year on year, the contracts were defaulted on. Companies that I have worked with had zero default because prices were high and the producers knew that they'd remain high.
And doing that, locking in a price a year before it's harvest, you can, I think that was the example you told me, these people were able to protect themselves by buying the equipment to protect against rust?
Yeah, so a great example would be a copy that is currently available on the website from a farm called Finca El Carmen. And whilst I was in Guatemala last year, I drove down into El Salvador and visited the family that owned the farm. Unfortunately, 25% of their farm had been so badly affected by rust, I walked into the fields and couldn't tell it was part of the farm. The trees had no leaves. The trees were actually twigs lying on the floor, and their production was massively affected. I was able at that point to say to them, we'll guarantee to buy this amount of coffee from you next year. They were able to take the contract that we'd given them to the bank and secure a loan, and then they were able to, using that loan, replant. Unfortunately, the replanting isn't going to affect the production for another 4 years, but the things that they're able to spray, the sprays for the rust, the fertilizer they're able to use, ensured that this year they had a product to sell us, and Pact bought all of that coffee, or almost all of that coffee, immediately on arrival, and that has enabled the contract for the following next year to be done again, so they can continue to get those loans in advance and make sure that the farm continues. That farm's been in the family, I think 3 generations. It's been in the family a lot of generations. I know off the top of my head, I think it's 3. And by doing this, we're enabling them to stay in business, which is an important thing.
You have on your website, you have little bios about your growers.
Yep.
I just wondered if you had some more details about your growers. As a customer, I'd be interested to read more about it, where they're farming.
Well, in 6 months' time, you should be able to see a selfie of Will standing next to us.
There are a few coming up soon, but yeah, a couple of producers. That's what I said.
Do we have a question on?
Yeah, we've got one on Google Hangouts from Alison Hall, and it says it links into what you were talking about before, and also some items you have touched already. As well as paying a higher price, are you going to focus on social and environmental sustainability? Fairtrade doesn't only address the financial side. How will you differentiate yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we were talking about this earlier in the office. So there's, and I separated them out earlier quite intentionally. There's economic considerations and there's environmental considerations. Rainforest Alliance is the Fairtrade equivalent. I think Fairtrade, I believe, do make some guarantees about environment, but Rainforest Alliance are the highest standard on that front. Because of the farms that we work with, environmental is a secondary consideration for us right now, because they're all really small producers. They're not into mass-produced, like forcing crops or expanding rapidly. They couldn't expand rapidly even if they wanted to. So we've taken the decision to focus on the economic impact, what workers are paid and what conditions they're kept in. First. Oh yeah, first, of course. But if every single farm, so we bought from 40 farms in the past 18 months?
49, I think is the number.
49. We bought from 49 farms in the last 12 months, or last 18, sorry. If every single one of them immediately doubled their capacity, it would have a smaller environmental impact than if a large Brazilian plantation increased its production by 5 or 10%. And I use that stat just to sort of, I guess, point out the fact that we're fairly low risk with our sourcing on having a negative environmental impact. Also, coffees of this standard tend to be grown in the shade, tend to be grown in, I mean certainly 4+, but older coffee bushes grown in the shade of native trees. It's above 1,000 feet. So it's there's low risk that we're going to have a negative environmental impact, which is why we're focusing on the other first. Does that answer the question?
What's the social component?
So social, yeah. I mean, I think we covered this before. The social impact, I mean, the point that we're focusing on is how much how much pickers and producers are paid by growers. Our hypothesis is that by paying a farmer more for a standard of coffee that's so good, it has to be picked and processed by more skilled labourers. It's not high skilled, but it's certainly semi-skilled. That there is a trickle-down effect. Paying more for great coffee, not compromising on quality, results in workers being paid more. Our challenge in the next 6 months is to prove in a robust academic way, through working with SOAS, that is actually happening. And if we find during that process that it's not happening, we'll have to find another approach, and that'll be our hypothesis shot, and we'll need to find another. Yeah? Anything else? Good. Cool.
Any more questions for you guys?
Yeah. What do you guys think about that? Environment versus humanitarian considerations, I guess.
I'm sitting too close to this.
No, but I mean, which one do you think about more? Maybe nothing.
I don't think I think it kind of has to come back. If you're going to trade ethics covers both. So if you, from my perspective, can't solve one problem while completely ignoring another and claim to be ethical. So I see it's probably the same place that you're at, that the idea of fixing a problem and not causing a new one, trickle down economics, and ensuring that everything's should be.
Yeah, I would say you can't keep your seem to work hard enough to be able to do well at both of them.
You said there's not really an answer to how to fix it. So we'll wait and see what you come up with.
Yeah.
I mean, another model, Snow Leopard vodka, they give like 15% of profits to conservation projects. So they're just like, we don't need to attach ourselves to any particular label or certification or anything like that. We just tell people on our website 15%. And presumably,
as an accountant, you can heavily manipulate.
With KPMG watching, yeah, I don't know.
You can't just pay yourself more money.
The point is, like, giving a percentage of profits is a really, really hairy area. I mean, you're as CFO. I don't know. Can we talk about this stuff?
Of course.
When do you think we'll turn a profit? No, seriously, when? No, because I mean, we, as a startup, we've raised money from investors that we have what's called a burn rate, so we lose money every month. We don't have profit. So yeah, we'll give 100% of profits to any charity for the next. I mean,
till October 15. That would be
October 15.
In a risk
there we go.
Scenario.
There, you heard it here first. So it's, I mean, that for me, I don't know anything about Snow Leopard vodka, and it may be that they have very, very high ethical standards, but the cynical marketer would say, yes, we'll give this cut of profits to this, that, or the other. This X percent of revenue is very different. If we sell a bag of coffee, we've got $6.95 revenue. If we lose £1,000 that month,
very real difference.
Yeah, 20 pence a pack, like Shelter do in various commercial types, like M&S.
And round up your bill in a restaurant.
Yeah, exactly. All of that's really transparent and really solid, but a percentage of profits is so. I mean, literally, if I decided to 1 year, let's say hypothetically, in the glorious future, we've got £100,000 of profits in a time period, and I up my salary by £100,000, the profits would go
Yeah.
You know, or you reinvest in marketing, for example. So we could choose to spend it on advertising rather than record it as a profit, which you're taxed on, which most people do anyway. So it's a dodgy model.
Okay.
I think.
Oh, I wasn't trying to catch you.
It's quite an easy promise to make.
Oh, really?
Okay.
Yeah.
I'd much rather you trade in equity and we're quite open with the fact that we're not giving this money to anybody, we're just trading equity, we're not having a negative impact. That's what we're setting out to do. So not having a negative impact has got to be first and foremost.
I think an important thing to remember as well is when you set the standard as paying a good price for a quality product, it's very different to saying, I'm going to charitably give this money to this person. It's setting a standard and saying, I believe in this product, and no matter what happens in the economy, I want this quality product and I'll continue to pay for it.
So long as it remains a quality product.
I think when you hit tough times, most people would admit to maybe dropping those charity payments a little. You know, as a company, you know, you hit tough times. The 15% profit example is a perfect example of that. You know, 15% become a lot less money. You know, what we're looking to do is set a sustainable business model with producers. You know, whereby
to be clear, making a sustainable business model for us.
For us as well, sorry.
Because it's got to work on both sides.
Yes. You know, we want to make something that is sustainable in the long term. You know, paying a good price for great coffee that isn't affected by external economic circumstances. You know, in times of recession, coffee sales don't actually necessarily change that much. I think if you looked at the type of coffee sales of commodity, there's probably a shift in the type of commodity coffee we buy. But in terms of quality coffee, in companies again that I worked with, there was not really a shift. In fact, there was growth through the recession of specialty quality grade coffee. People stick with it. You know, that's the quality of coffee they're used to. That's what they're going to continue buying.
You see that all over. I mean, so many different markets as well. In times of recession, you see a big spike. Basically, the middle loses out, and either end benefits quality-wise. So during a recession, Tesco's loses market share to Asda and Waitrose. In fact, Lidl and Waitrose have been written about a lot. People keep hold of low-cost luxuries. I think it really, you know, obviously.
Yeah, they'll lose their holiday.
Yeah, exactly.
But they won't lose. I mean, you're a customer. Would you go back to normal coffee?
I'm going to go on holiday too.
Oh, maybe.
We do have a follow-up from Alison Hall.
Oh, cool.
And she has said, what can we do to support the social development of the community? So maybe less guaranteeing the financial transaction between the farmer and the worker, but can we guarantee anything to wider social impact of coffee?
I guess that she's referring to, I don't know, things like education and healthcare and infrastructure. And no, today we can't guarantee anything. I mean, I won't make any promises that we can't keep, and I won't write it off as something in the future. I think it's an awesome thing to aspire to. Yeah, I mean, it sounds so weak. It sounds so weak. It's not something we can promise today, and it's not something we can write off. Yeah, I think it's aspirational. I think it would be a really interesting addition, actually, to the bit of research we do with SOAS. I'm kind of stumped by it because I don't understand what's meant by it exactly.
Yeah, well, I thought she has the chance to reply. So
Yeah, well, I hope she does.
A number of the farms we're currently dealing with currently run social programs, including housing for pickers and workers on the farms, schooling projects. I think India Booby Plantation gives interest-free loans.
Yeah,
to,
bee plantation loans, really cool. They the pickers on their farm, when they get to the age where they can't pick anymore, the plantation owner will make a small business loan to the picker to buy a bit of his plantation to start essentially a retirement business, which I think is amazing. We will include that. We will include that question in part of the SOAS research. It's a really good. I mean, it's not something that I'd thought of before, which is why it threw me a bit. But we'll absolutely include it. And if what's the
Alice.
Alice.
Alison.
Alison. So if Alison sends through, and obviously anyone else, you guys, or anyone listening, or anyone sends through any other questions that they would like included, then obviously within reason, we'll include them. That's a really good one to include.
That's another one.
Hey, there's another.
She's asking maybe for slightly more clarification on environmental impact, and she mentions, for example, organic versus non-organic. So maybe specifically how relevant that is to coffee uses.
Well, just to repeat, we're not currently looking at environmental impact because we know that the people that we buy from, almost regardless of what they do, even if they try to all collectively double in size the next year, would have limited environmental impact because they're small producers who grow in a way that is already low impact. On the organic question, Will's probably a better place to answer.
I think first of all, the thing to mention is, like I said earlier, a lot of these farms have been in families for generations, and these are businesses that families are expecting to be able to pass down through their families for generations to continue. They are not looking to take everything from the soil for a quick buck. They need these farms to be sustainable for a very long time. In terms of organic, I'm a big fan of organic coffee. I think it offers some really interesting. Again, going back to my trip to Guatemala last year, a lot of the farms I visited had been terribly affected by rust. The farm I visited that had been least affected by rust was in fact an organic farm, one of the oldest organic farms in Guatemala. And it's actually a coffee that we launched onto our website last week. It's called San Antonio, and I was amazed to see the effect that allowing natural microorganisms and life on the farm had on holding back this disease phenomenon that's been affecting Central America to a level of national emergency. So organic coffee is something that we'll continue to look into. I'm not necessarily sure that it's going to we necessarily move to selling all of our coffee as organic.
I think it's unlikely that we'd ever sell all of our coffee organic for the same reason that the cost of certifying as fair trade is prohibitive for really small producers. The cost of certifying yourself as organic is also completely prohibitive. So even if a coffee is grown organically, or if anything is produced organically, unless they've paid an amount to a certifying body, which does sort of on-spot audits also, then they're not allowed to use the stamp. And very few of our producers will ever choose to make that investment.
Absolutely. But that's not to say we won't continue to look for great organic coffee. Like I say, right now we are selling a coffee that's fantastically organically produced. We don't need to rave or shout about it. It's a great producer to have a relationship with.
San Antonio is the first coffee. It was really exciting.
Misty-eyed about it.
Yeah, no, I do. No, it's the first coffee that we've ever stocked one year and then again the next
You have
because.
to stop here, Stephen. Callan pork pie.
Is it?
We had India Brewing Plantations. Right?
It's the second. It's the second. Sorry, it is the second, but it's third. Oh, Jesus. It's been nice. No, it's exciting. 18 months ago, this business was me in my kitchen by myself, and it's really cool that 18 months later, we've now 3 times bought produce from the same farmers one season and again the next. My feeling is that will be a great deal closer to 100% in 12 months' time. I mean, anyone who's maintained their quality, the quality of their coffee, should be back on the roster this time next year.
Today, about a great producer, produced fantastic coffee last year, and we're hoping that coffee in Montana.
Ah, nice.
So we're hoping that this year coming up we'll have hopefully a little more. We're hoping that regularity will increase by a few bags.
I have a question from Philip Wilkinson.
Really? Hi, Phil. Phil used to run a competitor. Has always been an antagonist.
Do you aspire to the ethics of any other coffee suppliers here in the UK?
Oh, that's a great question. No, at the moment, there's no one in mind who we think we want to do what they do. I think there's a few. I think there are a few companies who are making great strides with their ethical sourcing and sort of setting out on their own to set standards that meet kind of their own moral compass rather than someone else's. Union Roasted, I think, are really good, and they are giving a huge amount of thought to the way that they structure their direct trade. But no, there's no one. Cool. Fine. Would you like it?
Yeah.
So we can stick around until 8 o'clock.
Yeah, sure.
Advertise.
No, we'll stay on until 8.
Absolutely.
We'll stay on until 8.
Don't feel obliged to say it.
No, exactly.
You're getting bored or any other thing. And if you need top-ups, just yell.
Thank you.
I might have some water.
So, yes, for our online audience, we'll just need to be down for now because it'll be chat.
Yes.
Maybe not of much interest, but if you do have any questions, then please go on to our Hangouts or tweet us, and if they're in before 8, we'll get back to you. If they're in after, we'll get back to you tomorrow. Slightly.
Cool.
Right. Thank you.